All right, it is 6 p.m. and I will call this meeting of Lunenburg Town Council to order. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And given that our meeting tonight falls within the mourning period for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, I'd like us to observe a minute of silence prior to beginning our meeting. Thank you. And I'm sure we all wish His Majesty King Charles III a long and prosperous reign. And with that, I will look to a motion to approve our agenda. Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Ernst. Is there any discussion or debate on the agenda additions, deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. That takes us on to the meeting minutes of August 9th, 2022. Can I get a motion to approve those as circulated? Moved by Councillor Duggan, seconded by Councillor Ernst. Are there any errors or omissions to note? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. We have two presentations, one of which is a public information meeting regarding the municipal boundary review process, and I will turn it over to staff to open the floor for the boundary review and inform everyone of the terms of participation.
Thank you, Your Worship. A public information meeting provides members of the public with an opportunity to learn about a proposal and make their views known to council. A presentation will be made on the subject of the meeting by staff. Council members may ask questions. If received, advanced submissions from the public will be noted. The mayor will open up the floor for public submissions in person and online. Council will officially close the public information meeting. In this case, feedback received will be accounted for in a follow-up staff report containing the draft town submission to the province at an upcoming council meeting. There are a few general rules of conduct that are to be observed so that everyone who wishes to speak can do so in an open and respectful environment. The general rules for conduct for speakers are: please state your name and civic address clearly so that it may be recorded in the minutes. Speakers will be limited to one presentation unless called upon by the chair for further comment. We ask that you be respectful of each other's opinions. Comments and questions by the public are to be directed to the mayor as chair. Please note that once the public information meeting is declared closed, no further questions or comments will be received. For Zoom attendees, if you wish to ask a question by audio, click on the raise hand icon, which will be enabled when the public meeting begins. This will enter you into a queue in the order in which hands are raised, and you'll be granted access to a microphone when it's your turn, then it will be disabled. If you wish to ask a question by text, type into the chat function and staff will relay those questions to the chair. As advertised, this public information meeting is to present information on the in-progress municipal boundary review due to the province in 2022. The requirement of such a review is set out in the Municipal Government Act. The body who processed the applications is the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. In a staff background report, an analysis of the following questions was provided a recommendation of no changes on each one: number of councillors, not including the mayor, number of polling districts, boundaries of polling districts, fairness of polling districts, reasonableness of polling districts, and pre-hearing public consultation process. At the August 9th, 2022, Council pre-approved the staff recommendations. It remains to be seen if the public agree. If the public does not agree, the changes would be brought forth for Council's consideration in a further staff report. If the public does agree, a draft application to the NSUARB will be prepared with a staff report for Council's approval at an upcoming meeting, but before the end of the 2022 calendar year. Public consultation is an integral piece of the boundary review, and the NSUARB expects to see the results of such consultation. There was a fact sheet published in August, a news release, newspaper advertisements on August 24th and 31st, a public survey online and print that was available until the end of August, and the public information meeting taking place now. Here are the two charts from the survey results that are the most pertinent. First, the number of counselors. This chart was shared with the survey and also in the background report. And this is the results of the survey. The majority, 63.6% of respondents agree that Lunenburg has the right number of counselors. Next, whether the town should continue to be a single polling district. Again, this map showing the boundary of the single polling district was included in the survey, the newspaper ad, and the background report. And the results, the majority, 95.5%, agree that Lunenburg should continue to be a single polling district. Next steps in this process. A draft municipal boundary review application to the board is prepared by staff. The draft is presented to council at an upcoming meeting for final approval. The municipal boundary review application is then submitted to the board before the end of 2022. The board will schedule a public hearing to be held in the town. The town will present its application and the public will be invited to comment. The board will then render their decision within 60 days of the hearing. Information links are shared here and were available in the fact sheet. Do members of council have any questions at this time?
All right, I'll open the floor to see if there are any questions of members of council. Seeing none, I assume the next portion of the meeting would be to open it up to members of the public. If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the municipal boundary review process. Anyone online?
There is not.
Going once, going twice. All right, if I can get a motion to close the public information meeting for the boundary review, moved by the deputy mayor, sorry, seconded by Councillor Sanford. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Next, we have a presentation from the Brighter Days Capital Campaign on behalf of South Shore Regional Hospital. And we're joined tonight by Tim O'Regan and Paul Snow to give us a presentation on their behalf. Gentlemen, if you just want to come down here to the mic and you can see the timer. You'll have 10 minutes to give your presentation and then we'll have 5 minutes for council questions.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening some information on the Brighter Days campaign for the South Shore Regional Hospital. My name is Paul Snow. I'm the chairman of the pace setting committee for the campaign, which is the part of the campaign that's responsible for raising large donations over $100,000 from individuals and corporations. Joining me is Tim O'Regan. Tim is one of the co-chairs of the campaign, and he'll present later on in the presentation. So we're gonna do a short presentation on the plans for the hospital, talk a little bit about the campaign, and also talk a little bit about the impact of the changes on the community. So if you look at the scope of the project, I think most people in this room probably know that the hospital was built in the 1980s and essentially is no longer able to accommodate the demand that's being placed on it. There's also a need for updated equipment and the introduction of technologies probably available in other jurisdictions in Nova Scotia and Canada, but we haven't seen those here in Lunenburg County yet. So the project itself will see an increase in the size of the hospital by 30% or 48,000 square feet. The overall cost of the project is $116 million. There will be a new two-story addition, a single-story addition, and new buildings provided for mechanical and electrical. So if you look at the main changes that are happening with the expansion, one of the key areas is the emergency department. And again, the emergency department is quite small. It's quite busy today, and again, is in a need to be expanded. So with this project, the emergency department will increase in size by 3 times. And the number of treatment rooms will increase from 14 to 20. One of the key changes with the expansion is the introduction of a dialysis unit, which we currently don't have in Lunenburg County. Anybody that requires dialysis today has to either travel to Liverpool or the Valley or the city. And there's a significant number of people in the community who require this treatment. So I think with the addition of this to the new build, it will save a lot of headaches, I think, for people requiring this service. One of the other highlights of the project is the introduction of an MRI machine. Again, this is a service that residents from Chester down through Shelburne have to go elsewhere to receive the Valley or primarily the city. There's also the addition of a SPEC CT scanner, and this is something that the staff at the hospital has been looking to upgrade for the last 10 years or so. The one that we have there is, I think, around 15 years old, and there's much better technology available today. So that will be a part of the expansion as well. There's also going to be expansions to the endoscopy and day surgery areas in the hospital. Again, those areas are quite crowded today, and in a lot of cases, people do not have the privacy that they require. There's also systems upgrades in the new build, and the first phase of the project has started. So if you go around the hospital today, there is activity there, and it will take about 4 years for the project to be completed. We wanted to just talk briefly about the campaign itself. With these kinds of projects, additions to regional hospitals, the province requires that the community get involved and raise some of the monies that's required for the project. I think that's pretty typical. And in this case, we've been asked to raise 6.6 million. And the full 6.6 million will go towards the purchase of equipment for the hospital. So it's not pertaining to bricks and mortar. Everything will be funneled to the equipment that's required for the expansion. We have 2 co-chairs for the campaign, Tim and a local businessman, David Himmelman. And both these gentlemen feel strongly about the campaign, and them and their families have each contributed about they have contributed $500,000 each to the campaign itself. So it was a great start for us for the campaign, and I think that followed through in the community. And with the campaign, we have about 100 volunteers that are working on different aspects of the campaign. So it's been well received in the community. And the campaign itself has started and has gone quite well. And I think it's an indication that Nova Scotians care deeply about their healthcare and the need to have proper healthcare in their communities. So the campaign has had a good response in the initial stages from our point of view. So I'll pass it over to Tim, and Tim is going to talk a little bit about the impact on the community and also ways that you can contribute to the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Hello. So the Social Regional Hospital, as most of you know, I'm sure all of you know, services an area, quite a large catchment area, travels almost all the way to Hubbards and goes almost all the way down to Shelburne. So it's quite a large catchment area. The redevelopment project itself is going to positively impact our area in a number of ways. We expect that once the project is complete, we're going to add about 60 to 80 new permanent positions in the hospital as well that don't exist today. The significant reason to support this program, this capital campaign, is also to support the influx of new residents to the area, all through Lunenburg, Queens, Shelburne counties, almost as far as Halifax counties, really. And we also see it as a significant help in terms of retaining and recruiting hospital staff, whether it be support staff or whether it be nurses or whether it be doctors, specialists and whatnot. So we know that we have a lot of challenges in that area, and we really feel that this is going to support that significantly. The construction itself has already started, and it's going to go on, as Paul had mentioned, for another 4 years approximately. We expect to have about 300 construction workers in the area during that construction period. So they're going to be all over this area, hopefully spending some nights here as well and spending their dollars. So we have started the fundraising about a year ago. We've been at it for about a year now, and we have had a very successful start to the campaign. We're publicly launching on Saturday, and our goal was to have about 80% of the funds raised by that time. And I'm happy to say here tonight that we have accomplished that goal. We've raised approximately 80% of that, not all in cash. Most of it is in pledges. So in other words, a promise to pay. But we've had a very successful start. Most people that we've approached to date have been giving stocks, gifts of stocks, which is sort of the simplest way in which to give. And we are approaching all municipalities throughout the catchment area to ask for support. So we're here tonight to ask for town of Lunenburg's consideration for a pledge of $100,000 over a period of 4 or 5 years. So we respectfully submit that request, and we hope that you will consider that ask.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
All right, we now have 5 minutes of questions from councillors. Are there any councillors at this stage? Councillor Birtles.
Thanks. Thank you for the presentation. It was really good. I just have one quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Just where you listed about wanting to increase the emergency department triple in size. It's definitely needed. The biggest concern now is there is no staff to maintain what we have. How confident do you feel that you'll be able to maintain the staff by tripling it in size?
Yeah, it's a good question. And where we're not bureaucrats in the system, I can't really in any kind of meaningful way answer that question, other than to say that our hopes with this particular renovation and the equipment that our campaign is funding, new and necessary equipment and additional equipment, that we're hopeful that, in a bright new environment, new equipment, new technology, that will appeal to people to come work at Social Regional Hospital. So we hope that is a sort of a solution to that problem, but it certainly is a problem.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Birtles. Councillor Halverson.
And thanks for the presentation. And thank you, Tim, and your family for the generous donation. A quick, just wondering where how the foundation, or not, sorry, I guess the campaign came up with the amount, $100,000 ask of the municipality.
Well, yeah, that is a good question. We're asking the larger municipalities to contribute 200,000, and we're asking the smaller municipalities for 100,000. And I think that would also go partially by population. So there would be some municipalities we'd be asking for, say, 50,000 or 25,000, depending on their size. We do have a confirmed contribution from the municipality of the District of Lunenburg for 200,000. They have given us that information that they are going to support us for 200,000. We've asked the same of the town of Bridgewater, and the smaller municipalities, some of them will be asking 100,000, and like I said, some of them 50 or maybe even 25,000. Yes, we did ask municipality of Queens for 100. Yeah, that's right. We haven't heard word from them yet.
Thank you, Councillor Halverson. Any final questions? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. And this ask does come later on our agenda, and there's a draft motion provided, so it will be duly considered then.
Wonderful. Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us on to correspondence. There's one piece of correspondence from the Breaking Barriers Together Association. There is no unfinished business, which is always pleasing. And that takes us on to notices of motion. There are two notices of motion tonight based on proposed staff policy amendments, and I need notices. First, a notice for the street services extension policy to be debated at our September 27th meeting. I have that from Councillor Birtles, so notice is duly given. And then secondly, the proposed land divestiture policy. There's a staff report and recommendation there. Can I get a notice from somebody, from the deputy mayor, that be duly considered on September 21st, 7th? Sorry, the 21st is my birthday. That takes us on to new business. Item 9, the appointment of a development officer. There is a draft motion provided, and there's a staff report and recommendation. I will turn it over to the Director of Community Development to provide his report.
Thank you, Your Worship. We are currently in the process of building the new Department of Community Development. One step in this process is the designation of our planning technician as the town's development officer under the Municipal Government Act. So I provided a short report for council's consideration, and it is recommended that the town appoint Trevor Hume as the town's development officer. It should be noted that I will personally stay on as development officer as well to help administer the town's land use bylaw, subdivision bylaw, and also to cover, things like vacation time and things as needed. So I like to put that motion as outlined in your package forward for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Would anybody like to move that draft motion as presented? Moved by Councillor Ernst. Is there seconder? Seconded by the deputy mayor. Is there any discussion or debate? Well, before we vote, I'd just like to say I think this is well deserved, and Trevor's work has been exemplary, and he's been a strong asset for all departments since he's been here. So I personally would have no issues with him being a development officer for the town of Lunenburg. And with that, I will call for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, that takes us on to item 9B, RFP for Upper King Street Extension. There's a staff report and recommendation there, and I will turn it over to the Director of Community Development to deliver that report.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is with regards to the Upper King Street Design Scenario Project. The town issued a request for proposal for the development of design scenarios for medium density residential and higher density residential proposals for town lands known as Upper King Street. The town was very fortunate to receive 7 proposals as outlined in the package. Staff reviewed the submissions and ranked them accordingly to the ranking system of the RFP. The top 3 were invited for interviews with the project team, which is the town management team, and 3 consultants chosen for the interviews were McKay, Lyons, Sweet Apple Architects, CBCL Limited, and ZAP Consulting, Inc. Following the interviews, the project team selected ZAP Consulting, Inc. to undertake the design scenarios for $57,035 plus HST or net HST in the amount of $59,500. There is a recommendation to proceed with the motion as outlined in the report for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Is it anybody's pleasure to move the draft recommendation as presented? Deputy Mayor, is there a seconder? Councillor Sanford? Discussion, debate, questions of Arthur? Councillor Halverson.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the report. It's but the rest of the councilors, that was a lot of reading this week.
With 7 proposals.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Again, that was a lot of reading, and to come out of that, what was it, a 1.5 difference in the scoring to the winning bid. I've asked this before, I think with our previous engineer, when we have a situation like this, it would be really helpful if we could see the scoring rubric to understand how staff arrived at the decision that they did. I mean, that was a very dense package, and sifting through that and trying to, in layman's eyes, trying to compare and contrast is quite a challenge. So I would, if that's something, was that something that's possible to do in the future? That we could have that the scoring rubric included into the package?
Well, I do have the scoring rank for all 7 available for council, and I
Okay.
can get Heather to put that up on the screen for you this evening if you wish.
That was the scores that you allotted to each?
Yes.
Was that in the package? Did I miss it?
No, we just provided the top 3.
Oh, I didn't see this. I see the percentage, but I guess what I'm looking for is exactly the evaluation that we're looking at on the screen now, where that's weighted. I guess I would like to see how you arrived at, say, the first one out of 25%, why one got 23, why one got 20, why that one got 20, that or 21, whatever, right?
Right. So if you scroll down, Heather, there's our ranking that we have for each one of the consultants that provided their submission.
Okay. But again, this wasn't in the initial package, though.
No.
Okay.
No.
I can't really sit here and read it now, but if
council wishes to have that in any future one, we'll definitely make sure that it's included.
I personally would find that helpful. I don't know if the rest of it, I see a lot of nodding.
I've got the Deputy Mayor next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, sort of along the same line as what Councilor Halverson is saying. I think, the entire package, like the top 3 picks would be great to review those. Beyond that, I have every confidence in the world you're going to get the top 3 right, that's hard to miss. The scoring would be another, mechanism just that gives us confidence in how you came to your conclusion. And then sometimes it might be, not always do you pick the lowest bidder or, and things like that. And so it's always nice just to have a little rationalization, like we chose this firm because we have, confidence that they'll get it done on time, whereas the other ones look like they're going to start later, and just little things like that sort of says, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense why scores are where they are. So that would just be my advice for future. But other than that, I'm sure, from what I see here, you've come to the right conclusion. So, but it'd be nice to have that rationale, save us questioning, like this sometimes too. Thank you.
Thanks. Any further questions? I guess then the request of council is informally is that, when RFPs are brought to us or awarding of tenders are brought to us, that there be a standardized process for how they be brought forward. I'll look to the CEO to comment on that.
Through the chair, Dick, Mayor and Council. You may or may not know, we've recently hired a new municipal clerk who's going to start on October 3rd. I would not want to share the proponent's name yet. I'm not sure if they've notified their current employer, but we are looking at a revisiting and revising of our agenda process from start to finish. And that would include things just like this. So things that you may have noticed in the past that would be helpful if you could send along through me, it'd be great. Things like these, I know when you have 7 proponents, it's always quite nice to have a bit of a cheat sheet of how we arrived to the decisions that we've made. I don't think there's anything untoward about that, and it just saves time from reading. So if you leave that with us and send along some suggestions as the new clerk starts, we'll start to refine that process to make it easier. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, CEO. All right, it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion is carried. That takes us on to year end and capital funding for March, for the year end until March 31st, 2022. There is for the electric utility starting out, there is a draft motion and staff report provided. I will turn it over to the finance director to present that report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, this is the first of 3 reports that we're going to have here this evening for the fiscal year end of 21-22. The auditors have been in and have completed their field work, and there's an audit meeting scheduled for September 28th at noon for the approval of the financial statements for last fiscal year. With regard to the electric utility, staff are recommending that council approve a year-end transfer of $173,000 to its future capital reserve. Through all our discussions with the electric utility, you know, there's many capital items on the list for that. After which, if council approves that motion, the electric utility will have a very modest surplus of $208,000 once that transfer is completed. The report includes a draft recommendation for council's consideration for that transfer. $208, sorry, I spoke.
Saying I would love to have a modest surplus from the electric utility of $200,000.
Lisa says modest, she means modest. All right, there is a draft motion for council's consideration. I have the motion moved by Councillor Sanford and seconded by Councillor Bertels. Are there any questions of Lisa at this stage? Discussion, debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, the motion's carried. That takes us on to item D, which is town general operating year ending capital funding for the year ending March 2022. There is staff report and recommendations for that as well, and I will turn it over to the finance director again to present that report.
Thank you, Your Worship. So regarding the town general fund, the town completed capital projects of $816,010 for fiscal 21-22. So you'll see in Schedule 1 of the report, it outlines finance staff's funding recommendations for these projects. The report contains a draft motion for your consideration for that funding. In addition, there are funds of $346,403 available for reserve transfers. They're outlined in Schedule 2 for council's consideration. Most of these are for several specific projects, as outlined in the report, but I just wanted to take note of the general operating reserve transfer of $202,000. The town has been working at building our operating reserves when funds allow to improve our provincial FCI or financial condition index. And so there is a draft motion to support those transfers as well.
Thank you, Lisa. There are 2 draft motions. I would suggest that they say ending now where the others say ended. So if we can just accept it as friendly that those say ended, and I will entertain a motion to approve those motions as presented. Moved by the deputy mayor, moving both. Yeah, and seconded by Councillor Halverson, seconding both. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, the motion's carried. And finally, the water utility, and I will turn it over to the finance director to present the water utility year end.
Sure. Last but not least, so the water utility also has some year-end funds available for reserve transfer. Staff are recommending $25,000 for the membrane reserve and $883,445 for the future capital reserve transfer. We are also recommending that the dividend to the town from the water utility be increased from $25,000 to $50,000. And once that is completed, the water utility will also have a modest surplus of $505. There are draft motions for your consideration in the report as well.
Don't know if 505 is modest after the Leah Electric utility. There are draft motions provided there. Can anyone, is it anyone's pleasure to move those? Moved by Counselor Duggan, seconded by Counselor Ernst. Question from Counselor Iverson.
Just a question about the dividend. Why are we paying the dividend and what's the purpose of that?
So annually, the water utility can pay a dividend to the town. And we have earmarked a couple years ago for that dividend to be used towards funding future fire truck equipment. At the beginning of the year, when we set our budget, based on budgeted items, we only thought that we'd be able to declare a dividend of $25,000. With the additional funds, we could just increase that. $50,000 is typically the amount we have been using. It just wasn't available at budget time.
All right, thanks for clearing that up.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through Lisa. I'm just wondering how our land reserve is with the water utility. I mean, we have purchased, a big portion of land there, and is that, what kind of shape is that in?
So that reserve, we had done all of the reserve transfers that were available in like the previous fiscal year. We had replenished that reserve then.
Okay.
I don't unfortunately have the reserve right here in front of me,
Yeah.
but we had done a significant transfer at that point. And if at any point there became something that was available, we could consider moving something. Council has a direction to move something from that future capital to the land if it needed to do that, as that flexibility.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further questions, comments, discussion, debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, the motions are carried. Takes us on to item 9F, which is the RFP award for the Electric Utility Sustainability Assessment, and I will turn it over to the Finance Director to present that report.
Thank you, Your Worship. So back in the spring, Council directed staff to prepare an RFP for the evaluation of the sustainability of the electric utility. The RFP closed at the end of July. Staff evaluated the various proposals, and we are recommending the award of the RFP to SEMA Canada for $65,000 plus HST. Just in consideration of some of your comments from earlier, SEMA is not the lowest bid, but the experience that they brought there, even when in consideration to the other one that was at the same price, was what had moved them ahead in the evaluation for staff.
Okay, there's a draft motion provided for council's consideration, moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I thought you'd be first. Is there any discussion, debate, questions? Deputy Mayor, then first on that draw.
I just would like to say this is way overdue, and you could have picked the organ grinder's monkey and I would have supported it. So.
You never fail to disappoint. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion is carried. That takes us on to item 9G, the Lunenburg Arena new sound system donation. There's a staff report and recommendation, and I will turn it over to the Recreation Director to present that report.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Lunenburg Arena has an existing sound system that was installed in approximately 1997 and is in need of an upgrade to improve the sound quality. The Lunenburg Area Minor Hockey and Sporting Society has offered to replace the existing sound system and install a new sound system with 100% donation. There's no financial impact to the town, and there's a draft motion for your consideration.
Thank you, Kelly. Is it anybody's pleasure to move that draft motion? Councillor Sanford's. I'll give it to Councillor Duggan because she seems the most enthusiastic in terms of the second. So moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Duggan. Is there any discussion, debate, comments, questions? Councillor Howes.
Yeah, just a question about who have you had any discussions with the association about who's going to be doing the install? I assume we're talking about a professional installers. They're not standing up there on a couple of ladders by themselves trying to do this, are they? All right.
Did you want to continue? Okay. There was a professional company that did come to look at the sound system. Nothing has been purchased at this time, but it would be a company that does it.
Thanks.
Okay. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, the motion is carried. That takes us on to item 9H, the GIS Master Plan RFP Award and our tender heavy agenda. There is a staff report and recommendation from the Director of Public Works, and I will turn it over to him to provide his report.
Thank you, Your Worship. The RFP for the development of a GIS master plan for water and wastewater systems closed on August 2nd. All RFP awards over 100,000 must be approved by council. So the town has identified the need for a complete water, sewer and stormwater master plan as a key part of ongoing efforts to develop our asset management plan. This plan is required to understand and model the existing underground infrastructure. With this plan, staff will be able to determine effective and systematic replacements and upgrades to the underground infrastructure, as well as strategies for sanitary and storm sewer separation and saltwater intrusion that impacts our system currently. So the GIS master plan follows on from the GIS work that was completed earlier this year. The master plan project includes 3 phases. So phase 1 is the field data collection and computer models. Phase 2 is calibration, and phase 3 simulations. The 22-23 capital budget for the project was $200,000, including the net HST. We had 4 submissions for the RFP. Unfortunately, 2 of those were non-conforming, so unable to be considered. There's a motion for your consideration.
Thank you, Tyson. If there's anybody's pleasure to move the draft motion as circulated, moved by the deputy mayor. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Ernst. Are there any comments, questions, discussion, or debate? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We all love GIS. Next is item 9I, the Duke and Prince Street Reconstruction Tender Award. There is a staff report and recommendation. It is with the Department of Public Works, and I will give it over to their director to present his report.
Thank you, Your Worship. The tender for the civil work associated with the Duke and Prince Street reconstruction closed on September 9th. All tender awards over $100,000 must be approved by council. The Duke and Prince Street reconstruction work includes the removal of existing roadway structure and replacement of gravels and asphalt along Duke Street between Lincoln and Townsend, and Prince Street between Cumberland and Fox. The combined total amount approved in the 22-23 fiscal budget for the 2 streets is $300,000, including net HST. Referring now to the tender results, the town received 1 bid from Dexter Construction for $347,920, excluding HST. The reason that there was only 1 bid received may be due to the market conditions and the timing of the tender being later in the season. So as I mentioned earlier, there's the 2 streets are approved in the 22-23 fiscal capital budget for $300,000 combined. And we have the details of the revised budget, which comes to $419,000. So there was a need for additional funding of $119,000 to be able to proceed with the work. There's a motion for your consideration.
Thank you, Tyson. Is it anybody's pleasure to move the draft motion as presented? Moved by Councillor Birtles, seconded by Councillor Sanford. Are there any comments, questions, discussion, debate? How did I know? We'll go to Councillor Halverson first and then the deputy mayor.
I'm going to guess we're going to be pretty well asking the same question, but that's a 25% jump in the initial what we budgeted. Yeah, is there, again, this is the only bid we've received. what are the odds in, is this worth the laying that's maybe putting it off till next year in an attempt to perhaps get a better deal on the services? Or do we feel like that's the best value we're going to get? Whoever wants to take that one.
Through the chair, having more bidders potentially leads to the competition, and you always want to see more bidders, but it's very hard to predict where the market is going between this period now and spring next year with market factors, inflation. So I can certainly see the perspective that more bidders would make it more competitive and potentially lead to a better outcome. But that's not the only factor that decides a competitive tendering process.
And then my follow-up question to Lisa is what's the impact on the D-transfer taxes when we, you said it's sufficient, but.
Well, certainly when just as we completed the year end, there were some additional funds that were there. So they weren't allocated to any particular project. It does allow us to move forward with this rather than the alternative could have been if those funds weren't available, that we would have to either cancel or pick one or the other for a project. So it's not impacting the D-transfer tax from what we've already been projecting because it was from a higher amount than what we had projected.
I'm just, if I may, Councillor Halverson, I'm just wondering if I can get the CAO to weigh in because I know that staff have been working on bringing a revised capital plan in the fall to get things out earlier next year. So I'm just wondering if the CAO can speak to that.
Through the chair to the mayor, you are right. We are working on bringing a capital project or capital budget to council sooner before Christmas, so we can get that finalized out of the way and allow us more time for RFPs and tenders and getting that work out the door. To Councillor Halverson's question about potential cost savings by delay, I'd like to say yes, but I can't say for sure. And I don't think Tyson could either. More bidders would certainly mean more competition. It's unfortunate we did only receive one, and this is substantially higher than what we've budgeted, as you noted. So I think we're always at council's direction, how you should choose, but we wouldn't be here if we didn't think we could do it this year. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And I appreciate the comment. I'm just wondering when that load of crystal balls we ordered is getting in here because it makes this a whole lot easier for everybody, you know.
I have one in my office. It's not plugged in.
The magic 8-ball, I thought, though. That's very different.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Tyson, I guess what I ask is, like, in your professional opinion, I know a lot of our construction estimates have been off, that we've been sort of what we budgeted on and what the reality of them are. But in your professional opinion, does that seem like a reasonable price for this work? And is this work, you know, and if so, fine. And if not, you know, has the infrastructure deteriorated enough that you know it's kind of a must do? I guess that's two questions.
So in terms of professional opinions on the market, I mean, we did get a Class A estimate from a consultant that was closer to our budgeted amount, but they also went through the process of reviewing the tender submission that we did and did a proper review, and the recommendation was that it was within the variance that the market provides. So I should have included that in the answer to Councillor Halverson. In terms of the existing infrastructure, both those the pieces of road are sort of in the core of Old Town, I would say, and the section of Duke Street, especially in front of the old fire hall, is in poor condition. If the tender doesn't go ahead, then Public Works will kind of probably undertake some short-term patching just to get us through the period. If ideally, though, it would be great to go ahead with the work in terms of turning off Lincoln onto Duke and having a nice surface for people to drive on, and the same sort of up behind the UNESCO monument and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of aging infrastructure in this town, and unfortunately, we do need to, we can't defer it. In my opinion, it can't just always be deferred and waiting for the perfect scenario. But again, we've kind of covered that potentially we could get a more competitive price if it was to be deferred. It's just impossible to tell you right now.
Any further questions? Councillor Halverson?
Again, thank you both for your answers, and I appreciate how difficult it is to try and forecast. I mean, I made the joke with the crystal ball. I mean, we don't know. I mean, we're in a volatile market. I guess my only comment would be is going forward, when we're putting RFPs out and we're budgeting for them, are we now budgeting based on what we've seen in the last year? Or are we still budgeting, based on historic, and then we're going to constantly come up against this ask for, to top those estimates up?
I guess I was just going to comment that we would certainly be considering current market conditions for those. A year ago when these budgets were prepared, maybe that wasn't always considered by those that were providing them. I think Tyson perhaps can speak to having some pre-work done for those things that, it's maybe you want to speak to that just a bit about process for that.
Yeah, so through the chair, I think the more developed our scopes can be when it comes time to budget, and potentially we have the Class A estimates or something closer where we know the scope, we can evaluate it and carry a number in the budget that we feel is going to cover what we expect the work to cost. Without being involved in the previous year's budget, I don't want to comment too much on the process, but it doesn't feel like the scope was far enough developed to be able to progress in that way. So I'm sure they were done with the best intention and done as well as they could for where the scope and the feelings on the market were then. But if we're further along in the development, I think it'll help staff sort of give council a better starting point, and hopefully we're not in the big fluctuations and variances in these meetings.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyson. Any further discussion or debate? Councillor Sanford.
I just want to say, as I'm listening to the discussion, I think this would be an exception and not our normal practice per se, given the circumstances that we're working with the one bid. We do need the street work completed. And I'm wondering, and we won't know what the cost would be going forward. Like the cost of everything is going up and everything gets passed down to the consumer. So if we were to wait, and yes, we may have 2 or 3 more companies bid, but are the costs of doing business going to increase to the extent that maybe it's not so bad if we do this now as an exception? Just a thought.
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Building permit reporting. So there's a staff information report about building statistics. And I see our newly minted development officer is rising to the podium to present his report. So I will turn the floor over to him.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to break with protocol, thank you for the vote of confidence earlier. Before you is an information report on our development and building permit reporting for the period of second quarter calendar year 2022. So this is in follow-up to our report we made to you in April. and covers the period from, of course, the 1st of April to the end of June. Since that time, since the time of our last update, we've done a bit of data entry that's allowed us to do a comparison to 2021 as part of another initiative that we had to undertake. So this report is the beneficiary of that. On page 2 is the table showing our second quarter calendar year. And on the right-hand side is the period of April to June of 2022. And we had 17 residential units approved during that period. On the left-hand side is the table for the corresponding period from 2021, and we had no residential units approved during that same period. Just a point of clarification too for future on these reports. It gives the listing of uses, their type, single family, for example, and commercial. That just means that they're residential units within a commercially zoned building, just to clarify what that means there. To compare then year to date to the end of June, on page 3 is the same table, only for that 6-month period. And you can see that we have, to the end of June, approved the construction of 36 residential units. During the corresponding period of 2021, we had 9. That is the majority of the report, and for questions.
Thank you, Trevor. Are there any questions about Trevor's report? Seeing none. Thank you, Trevor.
Thanks.
Excellent. It's nice to see a 4-fold increase in the number of dwelling units. I'm sure that's very pleasing to a council that just spent a lot of time and energy redoing all its land use bylaws. All right. Now a broader capital status update, a staff information report from the Director of Public Works, and I will turn the floor over to him to present his report.
Thank you, Worship. This staff report is a follow-up to details that provided to council at the July 12th council meeting and includes some further updates. So some key projects in the capital budget for 22-23. So the wastewater treatment plant flood protection. So the construction of the low permeability berms got underway in mid-August and should be completed in early September, providing the much needed protection for the upcoming hurricane season. So there was a picture, a photograph of the construction in progress from late August, early September, included in the report. Reinstatements for the access driveway and landscaping for the berms are expected to be complete by mid-September. So we should be paving in that driveway the end of this week and in good shape. Tannery Road water main replacement. So the contractor has been working on sourcing materials and planning for the commencement of work sometime in early to mid-September. So their equipment arrived on site yesterday and they're starting temporary water today, tomorrow, going forward. The expected duration of work is 6 to 8 weeks on that project. So the Duke Street and Prince Street reconstruction we've covered in the previous report that I delivered. So we won't waste time on that one unless there's some further questions on that. The Green Street sidewalk renewal. So staff had provided comments on the 50% complete design and are expecting the final design, including a Class A estimate, in early September. The budget and timeline risk remains for this work and is still likely to require deferral to fiscal 23-24. The Tannery Road sidewalk construction. So staff have recently been working with the consultant to examine traffic engineering issues associated with the sidewalk construction, and that's had some impacts on the delivery of the design. The final design and Class A estimate are expected in mid-September. And as we discussed on July 12th, this should allow us to be ready to tender and construct early in fiscal 23-24 to better take advantage of the expected market factors. And the repair to the spillway at Des Lake. So whilst our water withdrawal approval renewal is complete with NSC, staff is still looking for further clarification from NSC on their expectations for the ecological maintenance flow. The intent is to confirm that our current design meets these requirements, and assuming this is so, would allow us to proceed with the watercourse alteration permit and allow this work to proceed in fiscal 23-24.
All right. Thank you, Tyson. Are there any questions of council at this stage? No, seeing none. I would like to thank engineering staff. It's worth noting that neither Tyson nor his assistant director have been here more than a year. And as we can see, they've certainly dived into projects and planning with gusto. So thank you for that. All right, that takes us on to item L. Brighter Days Capital Campaign. There's a draft motion that this be considered as part of our budget deliberations for fiscal 23-24. I assume that is at the behest of the finance director. If there's any comment that you would like to make on that, then I will turn the floor over to you. Otherwise, it's presented pretty clearly.
Well, certainly, I figured since it wasn't an ask early in the fiscal year, that would be the most prudent time for council to consider the significant request from this evening.
Thank you. I agree with that. Is there a, can I just get it on the floor first? Is there a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Halverson, seconded by Councillor Sanford, and now Councillor Halverson with question.
I guess to Lisa, there is, there are options in this plan that we could break this up over a number of years. We want to make our contribution. What's your opinion? I know other councils have committed just the one lump sum. I guess based on what we're seeing in our plans and projections going ahead, would you recommend one, a payment plan, or would you recommend just biting the bullet?
I would definitely recommend a payment plan. So I guess I was thinking over a 5-year period would be my recommendation.
He's new to Lisa in budgeting, isn't he, Peter? We could have told you that. Deputy Mayor Moser.
Thanks, Your Worship. Well, the dilemma this always posts for us is that we have a community hospital ourselves that we try to support. And that struggles with its outpatients and its, and on all the other things that, healthcare is under the pressure under. However, this hospital does service us as well. I mean, no question about that. So, I mean, it's not necessarily that we would have to give the full amount. Obviously, we could choose what we give. But what I would like to do, maybe, I do think the over 4-year period is the proper thing to do. But it should probably, I'd almost like to suggest it needs to be almost a separate line item in our when we put out our tax, explanations, and that relates to so much, a certain how many cents per 100 of your taxes is going towards this, right? And if they see that it's going to be contributed over 4 years and then goes away, that might be something that might be more palatable than just kind of be thrown it in. And all of a sudden, our tax rate goes up 3 cents. Well, this might be 1.5 cents of it, right? And but I think it might be more tolerable to say, well, we can support this, but it's going to be, here's what it's going to cost you over the next 4 years. And that way, so the community can decide. And, it's the same thing. We are contributing to it one way or the other. Either we're going to contribute to it directly or we're going to contribute through our taxes. So that's always, but when we take it through our taxes, it's not a choice. We're making the choice for the community. So that's what I sort of like to consider if we move forward with this.
Okay, I've got Councillor Duggan and then Councillor Halverson again.
So along the same lines as what the deputy mayor was saying, I mean, we have our own struggling emergency department and hospital locally that requires a lot of support. It's 20 to 25 minutes closer than the regional hospital. I understand the need for upgraded equipment there, but I also, in taking into consideration what Councillor Bertels was saying, don't understand how they would staff, their new facility. I think there's still considerations to sort of look at there, and above finding staff, there's salaries to be paid and other such things. So I just think, like, if we're going to support a medical center, I would like to see the support stay locally within our own town. I would love to see more collaborative health center stuff around here and serving our aging population in town who likely wouldn't be able to travel for medical appointments. So I think it's just stuff that we need to keep in mind moving forward.
Councillor Duggan, Councillor Halverson.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to answer, this is our regional hospital. This is our hospital. When you have a trauma center, but when you get a car accident, you don't go up to Fisherman's, you go to South Shore. When you're going to have dialysis, you don't go to Fisherman's, you go to South Shore. All these things, all these brand new items and all this brand new equipment is going to go there. It's not an either or, like we're not getting a choice in it. The choice is, do we want to, what message do we want to send? Like, do we want to send the message that we support you and we're behind you, what you're doing over there? And, or do we want to say that, we're just more concerned with what's going on at Fisherman's here? And to your point, I mean, I want to make sure that our local hospital, Fisherman's, is supported as well. But, that is our major trauma center. And that saves people from going to, like the gentleman pointed out here, that saves people from going to other major centers like the Valley. It saves our residents from having to travel into the city to get these much needed services. Putting it 15 minutes down the road is huge. That's a game changer for many people's lives. And I think that $100,000 ask, I agree with what the deputy mayor is saying, but I actually, instead of thinking about it as okay, well, let's going to break that out so you understand, this money you're spending on your tax bill. Like, this is not money you're spending in your tax bill. This is money you're spending to support yourself and your community and your friends and your neighbors to get the healthcare you want. All we've ever heard is that we want better healthcare. We want more nurses. We want more doctors. Here's our chance to put our money where our mouth is, literally, and say, we want to support our healthcare workers. And how do we do that? We do that by providing them the best equipment we can afford. And, we're in this together with everyone else up and down who benefits from that hospital. So, I just want to throw my 2 cents in that one, that I think that, $100,000 over 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, to send a signal and to send a message to our healthcare workers that, yes, thank you. We appreciate what you're doing and we're behind you. I think that's fair.
Thank you, Councillor Halverson. Anybody else? I just have one, and I didn't have time to ask it because we ran out of time earlier, but I'd like for finance staff, if they could, to follow up with the capital campaign to ask how, us being $100,000 to Modal's $200,000 on a prorating basis. Like, I'd like to know, or equal to Queens, I think is a little, I'd like to know the logic and the rationale behind that before arriving at a decision at budget time.
We can certainly have that information for when we have the debate at budget time.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Any further comments, questions, discussion, debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Finally, there is a noise bylaw exemption request from the Lunenburg Classic Boat event. There is a draft motion provided, and if anybody on staff would like to speak to that.
Through the chair to the mayor, I think it's pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Is it anybody's pleasure to move that draft motion as circulated? Moved by Councilor Bertels, seconded by the deputy mayor. Any discussion, debate, comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. That is the end of our public agenda. So I need now a motion to meet in camera to consider the matter listed, potential sale of municipal property pursuant to section 22(2) of the Municipal Government Act. Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Ernst. And with council's unanimous consent, we will take a 10-minute recess before reconvening